Okay, everybody out there in YouTube land, it is I, Matt Yancik, founder and head game master here at Manufactured Myth and Legerdemain, and welcome to the latest and the greatest episode of Role Player with 1,000 Faces. So every so often, when I choose to stream the show, I do like to bring you interesting people from around the world, from around the internet, from around the community, and from all the different like settings and genres and all of that stuff, to take a look at what they are doing and how they're doing it. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Just to let you know, I am on various platforms around the internet. If you're interested, you can follow me on Twitter or on Facebook. But the truth is, I'm not really very good at updating either one of those things. And if I really tell the truth is I often feel like addicted to those platforms, so I try to kind of stay away from them. I know I'm probably social media-wise, shooting myself in the foot. But the truth is that I primarily use YouTube as my form of internet communication of choice. So if you are really interested in picking up the stuff that we're doing here at the channel, please do think about liking, subscribing, and sharing, telling others about it, picking up phones that you see at restaurants when the person goes to the bathroom and just logging into their YouTube account and subscribing them to my channel. That always helps out. So before we get to tonight's guest, it wouldn't be my channel if I didn't tease some things that we have that are coming up. So for those of you that have been watching the channel, I have been running an actual play, a role-playing adventure, which I call Sword in the Darkness, which is up to 5 episodes so far. It is, of course, using the one and only Cypher System as its game engine, but we will have the 6th episode of that coming up on Friday, April 28th. And for those of you who have not been watching the program, I don't want to say anything to spoil what happened in episode 5, but I will give you a quote from William Somerset Maugham, who said, "Every good story has a birth and a death." So if you go back and check episode 5, you might find one or both of those things. But anyway, things got pretty darn tense with our last episode, and they've taken a little bit of a turn. I think that we're kind of in the home stretch for this particular story, and we probably got 2 or 3 more episodes coming up before we finish it off and maybe move on to our next adventures. And most other channels would just sort of stop there and give you an actual play, but not here, not at Manufactured Myth and Legerdemain, because following that on May 1st, Monday, May 1st, I will actually be welcoming to Role Player with 1,000 Faces, Keith Baker. Keith is an Emmy award-winning game designer who has worked with companies like Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, and Green Ronin. And you probably know him best. We all probably know him best for, of course, his Eberron campaign setting. And as the story goes, it was actually a winning entry in a competition that Wizards was having when they were seeking out new settings for D&D and for their system. But anyway, enough of that. You didn't come here for that at all. I'm so sorry to tease all of that just to make the algorithms like to catch you for like a few minutes before we get to like the meat and potatoes of tonight's show. You definitely did not come here for that. So as many of you know, I'm a big advocate for the Cypher System. I kind of talk about it nonstop. I probably in an unhealthy way, or maybe in a way that I should probably see someone about. But I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. And that doesn't bother me. I'm happy in my own skin. Tonight I have someone on who I'm particularly excited about this because as some of you know that follow the channel, I do like to create a lot of my own homebrew stuff, and I do like to create things for my own games. And of course, I like to create my own settings, Sword in the Darkness being an example of one of those. Our guest tonight is someone that took their love for role playing and they took the stuff that they were creating and they took all of that and they've actually turned it around so that it is now like public facing and publishes all of their stuff. So to me, this is kind of an important person to talk to because I really like to hear about these cool stories about people that don't just sort of, nothing against this, but don't just sort of sit around the table writing out a bunch of notes and collecting a pile of papers and then handing it out to their players, but actually takes all of that and decides to turn it into a product which they then send out to other people. So tonight I have the co-owner and managing editor at Underground Oracle with me. But as I have heard her say in other interviews, she wears many hats. Tonight, she's literally wearing a hat. And she is also the head writer and the project director for Underground Oracle. And the community manager. Did I say that? I'm not sure if anyone else works there, because that's a lot of positions. I don't know how there could be other positions, but from what I understand, there's a co-founder involved. I'm not really sure about that, but we'll find out who that is. And from what I understand, they've hired a third person. So think of how many jobs they must have there. If everybody's wearing like 16 hats, and then there's 3 of them there, I don't know what that is. That's like 60 different positions. But anyways, in addition to all of that, she's also worked for Dwarven Forge and Crucible Magazine, and currently with her partner at Underground Oracle, Keith Pendley. She is this is the big thing I'm super excited about. She is working on a Kickstarter called Harrow, the Blighted Plane, and which which Underground Oracle bills as a crystal punk setting in a fallen fantasy world for, there's that word again, Cypher System. So without further ado, and I said that I was going to let her know when she's on. Jess, you're on. Jess Pendley, you're now on the program because, folks, the Zoom window is like the same to both of us. The mixing happens, the magic happens when I send it out. Jess, thanks a lot for joining me tonight on the program. How's it going?
It's awesome. I'm very stoked to be here. Very happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here as well. It's awesome to see you, and it is, like I was saying, it's awesome to see somebody that's taken their love for role playing to the next step and gone that much further into it. Let's just get like kind of started here. How'd you get into RPGs and what hooked you?
I absolutely love the escapism of it, really. I love being able to, I was always a big reader when I was a kid. And to me, it was kind of like taking that to the next level, which was, you want to immerse yourself with these stories. And with role playing, you get to do that. And then you also get to, propel it forward and be a part of it, an active part of developing these stories and these worlds. And that just absolutely captured me. Like I fell in love with it the moment that I started doing it.
What kind of stuff, if you don't mind me asking, what were you reading?
Oh my gosh, everything. Mostly like I read a lot of fantasy, of course, growing up, but I would read pretty much anything. I come from a pretty poor background, so my basically whatever my mama would pick up from a yard sale, she'd get these like quarter paperbacks and things, and she'd bring them to me, and I'd read them. And sometimes it would be like a full series of books, sometimes it would be like a middle book in a series or something. But I would just read whatever I could get my hands on. I was just constantly trying to like see, the world through these authors' eyes, and books were able to allow me to do that and do a lot of things that I didn't have access to in my normal everyday life.
That's actually, I think that's really cool that your mom was like picking the stuff up for you and kind of supporting you in that way. But let me ask you a tough question here, because this is a question that I had to answer all the time when I was a kid. Like, people would look at me, and I hate to say this, I'm an English teacher now, but I don't feel like reading was really popular, at least with my peers when I was a kid. Or maybe I was just hanging out with people that didn't read as much and there was like a circle of friends somewhere else. Was it like amongst your friends, were other people reading, or was this something that was like sort of like you on your own?
It was mostly me on my own. I mean, when I was like in elementary school, they would do the things where it's like you had the assigned times to read or whatever. So everybody had to
Mm.
like sit down and read for a while, you know. And from a young age, you could tell some people were way more into that than other people. But I was also the kid that was like, oh, I don't mind being by myself reading all the time, you know. So it was definitely kind of a solo act for me rather than
Mm.
like getting with a bunch of people and talking about books. I didn't really have that experience. It was more like I'm going to read in between classes or I'm going to, it was just kind of my thing on the bus, things like that.
Yeah, you know what, you mentioned those things, and I was just sort of thinking about this today. I know that, and I didn't know it until like years later. The way that I read, I would read in what I guess Stephen King calls sips. Like I would just carry a book around with me, and if I had 5 minutes at the bus stop, or 5 minutes on the bus, or I was at a doctor's office at the dentist or something, I would pull out a book, and even if it was just a couple minutes, I would just be reading. Were you the sort that was sort of, were you doing that, or were
Oh yeah.
you had a
I did it. Honestly, it's because now as an adult, I don't, it's weird. I don't read, well, I have a lot of other things that I have to do on a consistent basis. But I mean, when I was younger, because I had no life and I didn't have like a big list of things to do, I read constantly. So I would carry around multiple books on my person at all times because I never knew when I was going to finish one. And sometimes it would be like, oh, I've got this time, I've got 5 minutes to like squeak in some pages. And then sometimes I'd be in the back of the class ignoring what I should have been paying attention to in order to read. So I was basically just whenever I could squeeze it in, I would. And then, when I was at home, if it was, if I couldn't go out and play outside or something, I would, hole up and just read. So that was just kind of my whole thing.
How did that turn into RPGs then?
So the reading didn't actually turn into
Oh,
RPGs. I wouldn't say
oh.
directly.
First error in my line of questioning, folks.
Yeah, this interview's over now.
That's it. I can't.
That's it. This is amateur hour.
If you could rage quit, that would really help the
That
subscription.
would be great for your ratings.
That would be great. But if you can come back like in 5 minutes after
yeah,
that.
we can like quit, and settle our beef, and it'll make both of us actually much more popular. I'm sure.
Oh, that's it. We should do like, I don't know if you've heard of Andy Kaufman. He used to have fake rivalries with like professional wrestlers.
Wrestlers and stuff. Yeah.
Why am I streaming this right now? I've just revealed our secret. Oh, exactly. That's it.
I could have just walked up and like hit you at a con or something, and then it
with a
been
folding chair.
Yeah,
that's right. That'd be in a ring. Oh, that's it too. We should forget about having panels. We need to. Yes. Oh yeah. I gotta shut up real quick before.
Exactly.
Like before I get
take this offline. I think we've got something going here.
That's right. We got some magic. We got lightning in a bottle. I'm so sorry. This interview has gone completely off the rails. You were explaining how my question was bad and why you were going to quit, and you're going to correct me on my stupid assumption.
No, the reading definitely made like when I finally did role play, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like recapturing the first time that I really got into a book again, but even better to me. But the actually developing games, I would say, came from like, again, I was a pretty poor kid and we were very rural. So I was pretty isolated most of the time when I was growing up. And my younger brother and my younger sister and I we'd have board games or something. We weren't necessarily in a position where we were like, oh, we've played this one a million times or pieces are missing. We need a new board game. That wasn't something that we could really do. So we would turn the board over and draw a new map and create our own games.
Oh,
and
cool.
we would, or, we had like a bag of, Ninja Turtles from a yard sale. And suddenly those became like, we would create these really elaborate like war games basically that we would come to. We'd play like, every day together. Or we'd expand like, because we were like, oh, our Pokemon board game doesn't have the options that we like, and it doesn't reflect the TV show the way we want it to. So what can we do to add those things in there? So like from a really young age, I was working with my little sister, my little brother to kind of like, entertain each other and entertain ourselves and build stuff that I wanted to play and that I wanted to see them play and enjoy. So that's probably really more where the root is of it there, is just like the creating and the, having to rely on your imagination and kind of your own ability to sculpt that into something that you and then, your younger siblings can work with. So I would say that's probably the root of it.
What is that something that you then sort of, because some people come to like publishing books like really late or whatever, but did you kind of decide at that moment or like at that during that time in your life? Like, heck, I want to go on and I want to design games. Or were you thinking in other terms at that time?
I mean, I was thinking really in other terms. I didn't not honestly know that game designer was a thing that you could be. And I didn't like, I
Yeah.
discovered Dungeons and Dragons when I was like a teenager. But it never occurred to me that I could create something like that. You know what I mean? Like in my head, I was like, these are the avenues that you take, so I was like, in game designer never came up as one of those things. It didn't seem to me like a thing. To be quite honest, like when I was very young, my plan was to be a paleoanthropologist like my entire life up until like,
Quite different.
yeah, because I was very, very obsessed with like prehistory and things like that, and pre-colonial America, like was really my bag. So I was really into that. But I also always toyed around with wanting to be a writer, and it was something that like a lot of my teachers wanted me to do, and counselors and things. So when I finally went to college, I ended up going for comparative literature and creative writing, but it was with the thought that I'll be writing. And my big maverick thing was like, I'm going to create comic books because I was incredibly in love with comic books. Still am. I love comic books, but it was always from this world building perspective and the storytelling perspective that eventually evolved into doing what we're doing now, which is, not only am I creating this linear story that you guys can go on, but I'm creating the world that you can create your own stories in.
Right.
And that has a very specific sort of charm and wonder that we get to experience in this medium, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a way like you're not in a way, but almost literally here, you're setting the tones, setting the themes, setting like possible adventure, avenues and all of that with what you're creating. So were you doing that, I guess? I mean, because it sounds like if you're flipping over a game board and then just like drawing out your own stuff, it sounds like you're sort of, in a way, you're creating your rule sets, you're creating like your settings, you're creating all of that stuff kind of on your own. When was the moment that you kind of like moved into D&D? You said that you discovered it, I think in
so my when I was like 12, my mom brought home a board game called Hero Quest, and our whole family played it together. And I remember she had like she brought home these little expansion boxes that had like a new character to add with their rules and stuff. And I was blown away by that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the rogue, and I get to run around and I get to do these things. And there's my dad always played the person that was controlling all the creatures and things like that. And it was like, you go in here and then suddenly he turns all these skeletons are in this room. And I was like, it was such an amazing time to me. And the only thing that was really missing from that was like the immersion. It was super fun, but that immersion was missing. And so then when I was like 15, we at a yard sale got some players handbooks. They were the 3rd edition players handbooks, and I would just look through them because I really didn't have anybody to play with, and look through at all the arts and all the and I was just like, this is amazing. This is like, it's like acting, but it's in private, so I don't have to be embarrassed about it, because teenagers are terminally embarrassed about everything. And it's like, you get to create these characters and these stories. It's everything that you were doing as a little kid, but you get to do it again, and it's acceptable as an adult to be able to do that.
Right.
So that was amazing. And I actually didn't really get to start playing it until when I was about 17 or 18. And I started going to a city that was much farther away from where I lived, and playing at a local game store there. And it was amazing. Like I absolutely loved it. That's where I met Keith, actually. And we ended up, later creating things together. So yeah, pretty wonderful time all the way around.
What would you say then was it about? I mean, was it the acting that kind of caught your attention, or was it like the mixture of the qualities that you just sort of described, or was there something in particular that just grabbed you? And I mean, here you are years later, and you're still, I mean, you're in the industry.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was that immersion. It was that being able to escape for, a moment and be somewhere else and be someone else. And there were times when I was younger where, I wanted that very literally, you know what I mean? And as I've gotten older, my circumstances have improved. Me as a person, I've improved. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for, but it's still great to escape stress of everyday life or everything like that, but it was really just being able to embody somebody else and in these other worlds, and, do these fantastical things that are impossible to do in real life, and being able to just completely explore your imagination and being able to just dive into that. That was really what got me.
And so I had heard I don't know if it was, or maybe I had read, I don't remember, that you consider yourself a player for life, which I find, first of all, is that quote true?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
And
Player
so
for life.
I find that, yeah, I find that to be actually kind of interesting, because a lot of the people that I've talked to in publishing, the creators, they often say that, they can play and they can run, but they really enjoy the running part. I think it just appeals to like them getting their fingers in everything, I guess.
Yeah.
What is it then about playing that makes you just go, you know what, that's what's for me?
Well, I think it could be just because when I started playing with Keith, the way that he would run his games, it was very collaborative. So it could be because I came from a different position in playing than other people did, but it's always been a very collaborative thing for me. So I know that like the GM Keith in this case is rolling out the world, and then I am doing things to change it, and I'm doing things to get him to react in other ways, and sort of this back and forth where we're just constantly building on each other. And I always have really, really loved that relationship as a player. It's my favorite way to experience things. Even when I create all these things. We play in worlds that I create with Keith. We play, with mechanics that I create, but I still would rather always play them than be the person that's directing the entirety of the world. I like to be able to kind of step back in a single role and go, this is my purpose for this particular character. And I get to see what other people are doing as well, and just really kind of take in everything. And that's sort of the way that I enjoy my relationship with the game a lot more.
And is there a Jess Pendley character type, or do your characters kind of vary? Is there someone you're running now, or can you give us an idea of what?
To be quite honest, my characters range all over the place, because sometimes I'll have like this wild idea where I'm like, oh, I got to play this specific person and see what happens to them in these scenarios or something, if I'm feeling super nervous about something, then I will default to like, characters that are very easy for me to play. So I'll play like the sarcastic wise acre, or I'll play like, the big brawny person that's not super smart, loves punching things. These are easy fallbacks for me. And those, typically there's a mix of those in a lot of the different characters that I play. If I'm not playing something that I'm really trying to develop, then it's probably going to be someone that I love punching stuff, or I love, making wise ass remarks, or I do both, that's also a good sweet spot. But I really like to create, when I'm approaching the game, when I create a character, I've already got the idea of that person in my head and what their motivations are, and what, brought them to whatever point they're entering into the game, and what, and then so I've already got a person in mind to play. So it's sort of like depends on the idea that I've got when I bring it to the table. I'm not the sort of person, which is also strange because I do the mechanics building, but like, the mechanics are not necessarily like, I don't see something cool and I'm like, oh, I want to play a character that's able to do that cool thing. For me, when I'm role playing, it's like, I have this idea for this individual that I want to explore this world as, and I want to see, how the individual changes over time. So that's sort of the way that I approach character building, and what I love about being a player so much is that.
What do you look for? And maybe this is a two-part question. Like, what are you looking for in a role-playing experience, like with your game master? And then what are you looking for, like, with other players? Like, is there a particular type of player that you enjoy playing alongside, or is there a particular player that really annoys you? No names, please, unless it will cause my subscriptions to go up.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
Just
start some
think.
beats. Yeah.
If it's like Matt Colville or something, be like, oh, Matt Colville, blah, blah. Go ahead and feel free to name drop as much as you want.
Yeah.
But if it's
me
somebody...
and Matt Mercer really have some
right,
stuff to
there
say.
we go. Now you're thinking.
Of course, people who want to do the same sort of collaborative stuff that I want to do are always going to be the people that I enjoy the most. Keith's my favorite GM, and I'll sing, his praises constantly, because I think what he's able to do is amazing. It blew me away, and is kind of the catalyst for making me think that we could do this in the first place, just because he is such an amazing storyteller. So I've been very lucky to have that at the table. But that is, as a GM, what I want is the space to be able to play my character and tell a collaborative story, and yes, and you in a way that you're going to trust me to further the story and not derail things. Which it's understandable if some people don't do that with new players, of course, because, you don't know each other yet. But, I have a nice established group, so it's not uncommon for, Keith to lay out a scenario, and then I'll be like, oh, I know this person that does this over here. Let's go visit, and that's just something I made up on the spot, but it becomes a part of the story. You know what I mean? So that's my very enjoyable way of playing right there. As far as players go, I like people who want some kind of immersion that I do. So not necessarily the people that are like that. And there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum, and I'm definitely not going to say anybody's role playing wrong. But my favorite kinds of players to play with are the ones that are they want that immersion. So if we're joking, it's because we're joking in game, in the world as our characters or whatever. We're not talking about what was on TV last night, or we're not like doing movie quotes. If we're kind of in the roles, basically. So that's my favorite kind of player to play with. But, there's a time and a place for everything. If it's just a wacky one shot, do whatever. But I like the people that want to invest themselves in the stories and want to kind of push those along with me.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so then tell me, what is it then? So you mentioned you were in, and again, like I feel really bad, folks. Like I go out and I do research, but like a lot of times when my research is just kind of like stalking people with Google, and I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at stalking people with Google, but I get like snippets here and there, and sometimes I get conflicting bits of data here. You mentioned it though in the interview here earlier that you are into comics. Were you doing something in comics prior to?
Not actual comics. Okay. The very first big thing I tried to do was a comic journalism site. And Keith and I worked on that, and it's called Comics Crux. And it was a really fun experiment, and I learned a lot from it, but it was definitely not something, that I was necessarily prepared to do. But in my mind, that was going to be basically, we would use that, and then I would be participating in the industry that I loved, and then also kind of being able to observe people to see how I can make my way in this industry, essentially. Because the writing has and I would, we have plans to create the worlds that we have. I have comic scripts everywhere for everything. We've got stories set in these worlds as well. So these are all definitely things that I plan on doing in the future. But yeah, before the game design, it was definitely more of it was a comic first kind of thing. And it's just because I loved the medium so much. I really, really loved the to me it was, and it was funny because I was around a lot of book snobs in the way that I was constantly reading and stuff. So people just assumed that I was kind of that person that would be like, oh, you look down on comic books or whatever. But, I kind of I just saw them as another way to enjoy words, as a way to enjoy life and experience it. And I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do in that medium you can't do in books or on TV. It occupies a really sweet in between that I really fell in love with. But so the comics were the first love. And then, eventually I think there came a point where we were talking and we played constantly. And I was like, what if we took these worlds and created things for Dungeons and Dragons? And because we know this, we've been doing this forever, why not get these out here to people so that they can start creating their stories, and we can start, getting our passion out that way. You know what I mean? So maybe one day we can do these other things if we want, but this is a way to be able to get our love out in front of people, get these things that we've created and that we, have labored over, actually put them in people's hands in one way or another. And so that was kind of what got us here.
What were the first few things? And can I ask the timeline for this? So when was it is that when Underground Oracle was formed, or was it still you hadn't decided?
Yeah, we hadn't really, there was honestly, I'm fortunate now because I have a day job that, allows me to have evenings free to work on things. And it allows Keith to work on Underground Oracle full time. So that's awesome. That is a recent development in our lives. You know what I mean? We've up to that point, we're doing what literally everybody else has to do, which is you work all day long. You're both working all day long. And then when you get home, you're too mentally drained to really do anything except talk and dream. You know what I mean? So when we got in the position where we were able to start doing this, we were just we were so ready to go with it, because we finally had this free time, and we're just let's just attack it. Let's see if we can do this. And so late 2018, early 2019, we put out our first supplement for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition on drive-through RPG. And it was like a huge deal for us. And it got like, but I also was very new at things, and I just assumed, oh, people will see it. And I didn't realize, you're one in 300 million people that are doing the exact same thing that day. You know what I mean? Right. So it was like, then it became like a hustle and a scramble. And we're like, we'll just keep creating it. And eventually people are going to see it. And we'll just, keep interacting with the community because they seem like really cool people, and keep pushing forward. And so that's just been kind of what we've done since then. So
then your first stuff was, wow. So that is 2018, 2019. So that's, I ain't a math teacher. That's like what, 5 years ago?
Almost. It was, yeah.
So
right?
I mean, you and Keith have been at it for a while.
Yeah. Late 2018, early 2019 is when we started. Yeah. And then it was, we produced 5th edition supplements, for quite a while. And they were like small bite stuff. So our first thing was kind of like a villain toolbox, that came with like a setting and a big bad and like all this, stuff so that you could build your own story.
Cool.
With that, because that's kind of been our philosophy for a while. And then we started putting out like individual archetypes, magic item compilations, locations, things like that, kind of in an article style format almost, via our Patreon. And then we put those on drive-through RPG. And we met a lot of very cool people, and we learned a ton, and it was, awesome. Very, very happy that we were able to experience that. But also at the same time, we were kind of like, we were wanting to get to where we're at right now, which is to put out those full worlds, to put out, instead of, and I said this recently, but it's true. It's like we didn't want to be supplement producers. We wanted to be world creators, setting creators. We wanted to create things that we could then supplement our own things later if we wanted to, for people that specifically wanted that.
And so what was the kind of like the cadence for your publications? Was it sort of like, okay, whenever you got the time to put something together and get it out there, or was there a schedule? Was there?
So it's bananas when I look back at it. But when we first did it, I was like, look, here's what we do. We will create 2 things a week. We'll get them out. They'll be pay what you want. We'll just saturate as quickly as we can, and people will be like, oh, this is cool stuff, and they're putting them out like,
regularly.
And we did that for way longer than we probably should have. I honestly don't know when I was finally like, we need to pull back a little bit. And then it became doing every other week, where we like twice a month basically would do these supplements for our Patreon, and we would put them on drive-through, and then we would distribute to our patrons for free. And then that was the cadence for most of the time. And as things have changed a little bit, we added stuff in. I remember right before the OGL things happened, we were doing 2 small supplements and then 1 adventure in the middle of the month, because people love adventures, for like higher subscribers, things like that. And then we've recently had to change our publishing cadence again, because we've kind of really drastically shifted gears. So now it's more of developing. Each cycle, we pick a setting to create a quick start for. We distribute that to all the patrons, and then that quick start expands over a 4-month period. And based on, we just basically build the world in front of everybody and keep dripping out things inside of that quick start. And then we'll give like rounds of play tests so people can get their feedback in, whatever. That's how we developed Harrow. And then in that, we also develop Cypher shorts that we'll put on the store and distribute to higher tier patrons. And then, a few other extra goodies, but that's kind of what our cadence is now.
I think it's really, really impressive that you do that. And I think it's kind of like one of the unsung, I don't know what the word is. It's one of the unaccounted for like variables, I think, in success, basically. Like there are a lot of people out there that can create something really cool and they put it out there, and maybe they don't have the best advertising skills or whatever, but they put it out there, and then they sort of bask in the glow of it for a little too long, and they fall in love with it, and they don't really go on to the next thing. And the idea for to me, first of all, of putting out like 2 little things a week, first of all, seems insane, but
Yeah, it
it,
was.
it does impress me as far as having a real awareness of, like, if you just do something of some recognizable quality at a regular enough rate, sooner or later someone is going to notice, and then someone else is going to notice, and they're going to tell a friend, and then, it may go on, like you say, for a little bit longer than it should. But I think you're going to build a small community, and you've used that word several times tonight. So I really applaud, like, that idea of getting things out on a regular schedule. I also wanted to say, and this is something that I was really impressed by when I looked at your website, and I sort of did some digging. Like, I was really impressed by this idea of creating kind of a different setting or a different theme every quarter. I love this idea of sort of not ever sort of getting too comfortable in one setting and just digging in and saying, this is going to be my setting that's going to make me $1 million, and that's it, and I'm going to work on it endlessly for 5 years. And I like this idea of moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, and sort of seeing what catches, and also practicing. I think that there's somewhere in there's like a really excellent lesson for people that want to go from the fandom to, like, professional, if we can kind of use those terms. I'm impressed, like, with that idea. What gave you, how did you think this thing up? How did you think, okay, you know what, we're not going to fall in love with any given theme or setting, we're just going to keep moving? How did you decide on this quarterly theme?
Well, to be honest, it's because we're world creators, and we are sitting on 15 years of things that we've been dreaming up and creating together. So we currently have the luxury of being like, when we decided we were going to switch over to the Cypher system, we said, okay, this is a huge shift for us. This is a huge gamble for us, frankly, because we have an amazing community that we've built up around us and that have been incredibly supportive. But we also have been 5th edition producers for them. So it would be entirely understandable, love us or not, that you're like, I'm not, I'm in this for 5th edition and you guys aren't creating it anymore. So you're wonderful people, but we have to go. And we thought we were going to see a lot of that. We were like, we're at a point where we're not so big that we have so much to lose that we can't do it, but we also worked really hard to get what we had. So it was a very big decision. So we decided if we were going to do it, we were just going to go full out. We were gonna do exactly what we wanted to do. And so we were like, we're gonna work on a setting. It's gonna be our setting, and we're gonna get it out in front of people. And then it was like, well, which one are we gonna do? Because we have a lot, and we have a lot of ideas. And the very cool thing that I love about Cypher is that it is a truly universal system, and there are not a lot of those out there. So literally any of our ideas we could pursue. Whereas with 5th edition, you can always hack something together and be like, oh, this is my crazy sci-fi in 5th edition, or this is my this in 5th edition. But there are some things that just don't feel correct in 5th edition. As much as I enjoyed playing the game, there are some things that it didn't serve well. Cypher system, you can kind of serve whatever you want. That's the beauty of the Cypher system. So we were like, we can do literally anything that we have, and we have all these ideas. And then it was like, well, why don't we do all of them? We're going big. Let's go as big as possible. And so we sat down and we developed a plan, kind of the same thing that we did when we first decided to start doing the supplements, which was, okay, if we're going to do this, how are we going to do this? And so that's sort of how we came to that publication schedule, was just me going, why don't we try to do this, and ask people to bear with us and see how it goes. And so far it's been pretty awesome. I have to say we haven't lost the support of people, even people that had to leave, which is totally understandable for whatever reasons. They were still hung around to support us doing this, and to see how things play out, things like that. So we've been very fortunate in that way. We're also still, this is a brand new publishing cadence. This is us trying something fairly ambitious, so I'm expecting hiccups, I'm expecting things, and I'm hoping people will bear with us for that. But it's also an opportunity, which is I like to try it and fail and be transparent, and then pick back up and keep going forward and build on that. I like to learn, I like to fail forward. So this was the perfect opportunity to try to fail forward, which we had been kind of in the same sort of position with 5th edition for a little while. So it was refreshing to kind of have that feeling again that we had right at the beginning, which was, we didn't have this like this very comfortable thing that we had been settled into, that we knew what we do, you know what you're putting out. Instead, it was this big wild frontier, and it was like, you know, at the end of that, yes, it's scary, but you have your worlds waiting on you to create and to get out in front of people. And so it was incredibly exciting. But yeah, it was all just sort of in the moment, and the catalyst was just the switch to Cypher that allowed us to do that.
Well, I mean, it's pretty evident. Like the proof is in the pudding. So for those of you watching at home, Jess had sort of let me know that her internet is a little bit spotty, so she actually doesn't have the chat open. But Jess, just to let you know, the chat is hopping. It is hopping a lot more than it usually does in in my interviews. Nothing about the guest. It's me. I am very certain of that. But actually Keith is in there as well, and he's been actually adding a little bit. So there have been some questions and comments from others there in the chat. And Keith, thank you so much for that. Keith, I hope to get you on here someday, but I understand if you're not really that interested. I wouldn't be interested in interviewing with me as well, just to let you know. But thank you very much for
Matt, chill out. What does it say about me? If you're
What does it say about you?
What does it say about me? If you're downgrading yourself so much, that makes me a chump as well. So you need to pump it up a little bit.
That's true. Thank you. You're so much. You're like my. Do you know my therapist? You're talking like my therapist now. But at any rate, yes, you have drawn quite a crowd, and I very much appreciate it. And so let me just ask you then, and because we're kind of starting to blend into this here a little bit, you had been focusing primarily, I guess, on 5e, which is kind of interesting to me, because now let me ask you about the quarterly theme. Are these themes or different settings or completely different worlds or different adventures?
It's sort of a combination. So through our Patreon, we develop a setting. So for instance, Harrow, the Blighted Plane, which is what we have been developing during this cycle with our patrons. Every month, we also we release a set of Cypher shorts, which are like these one-shot adventures in the Cypher System, which I fell in love with, and they're very, very rad. And those match the genre of what our current setting is. So if you want to, you can play those in the world, or if you're playing independently in any general fantasy setting, you can play those as well. So for the last few months, it's all been volumes of fantasy shorts. When we switch to the next setting, whatever its genre reflects will then be what the next cycle of shorts will be as well. So it's kind of both. It's a setting, and then revolving around that setting, we'll release genre-themed shorts.
It's interesting to me because doing that, it seems like... And again, I play 5e, I play D&D. If it weren't for D&D, I wouldn't be the success that I am today with 465 subscribers on my YouTube channel. But I often think, like, if you're developing a different setting on a quarterly basis, I mean, was there a reason you were tying it to 5e, or had it just not occurred to you maybe to go with a generic kind of, not a generic, a multi-purpose rule set, or was it just that you've been playing 5e, you love 5e and enjoyed it, and so you decided to develop for it?
To be quite honest, when we started, and we've been playing and developing these things forever. So when we were first developing them, we were developing them for 3.5.
Wow. Okay, there we go.
Which was our, we had this, and we had this Frankenstein set of rules that we enjoyed playing with, so it was our version of 3.5, that we were playing, but that's what we started in. Then 4th edition dropped, and we were like, oh, we don't like that. So we started playing Pathfinder, which was like a super version of 3.5.
Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, well, we played Pathfinder for a while, that, we could develop our stuff for Pathfinder. And then, then Pathfinder 2nd edition rolled around, and we didn't gel with it as well. We only played during the playtest. And that was right at the point where we were in a life position where we could actually start looking at this seriously. Which is really, that's what we had to wait for. We had to wait for us to be able to be in that position in life in order to do it. And then I took a year just kind of studying the environment online, of people, like, what are most people playing? What are most people doing? What, what's the attitude of these people? And fifth edition was everywhere. You couldn't escape fifth
Yeah.
edition. Fifth
Yeah.
edition was like a big deal. And then Critical Role made fifth edition a bigger deal. It skyrocketed. And so it made sense to us to be where the most eyes were.
Yeah.
And because of the kind of supplements that we planned on creating, because of the type of storytellers we were very narrative first, very lore focused. That was always been our thing. We have this in-house design, style, which focuses around like a lore web, which is everything has to connect back to something. Even if it's an item, there needs to be a magic item that somebody has found. It's got a string of lore that connects it to various other things. Everything's connected. And fifth edition didn't have the rules to stand in the way of a lot of the things that we wanted to do. Some of the things that people bash it for are the reasons why we started playing in it, which was, it was a little looser, left things a little more up to the GM so we could play around with things more. And to be frank, it was everywhere. It was the biggest thing that you could possibly do. And it was, kind of a way for us to get our stuff out there and in front of as many eyes as possible. So that's why we started with fifth edition when we got out there, because it was the most popular system and because it didn't get in the way of what we were trying to do. And then we were lucky that we met a ton of amazing people through that. So, no matter what, Wizards of the Coast has done or what terrible people might be behind the scenes, the actual game and the actual community have been amazing to us. And so I'm never going to regret ever what we did or, how we did it or anything. It's all been amazing up to this point. But so that was the reason why we started with fifth edition wasn't necessarily because we're like, this is the best game system of all time. It was because it was the way for us to be able to get out in front of as many people as possible to tell our stories to people.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, as someone, I think I had mentioned several times, like I've often thought about publishing my own stuff and I hope to do that as well. But I've always I've always had to circle back to that idea of publishing something for the great, the great anchor in the ocean of D&D. But that's my own thing. But at any rate, real quick, I know I'm opening up a huge can of worms. Next question. So, have you heard about the OGL? Any thoughts? I'm just curious. We don't have to like obsess over it. I'm not one of those guys that if you look at my channel, I'm not like a super negative guy, but I'm just interested in hearing like what your thoughts were. Were you heartbroken?
I guess I was shocked in a naive way, I guess. But that didn't, I try to be as positive as possible, but when it comes to corporations and things, I'm pretty cynical. So there was momentary shock. And then I was like, well, of course. And it was a bummer. And also it was very scary for a hot second because I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is we put all of our eggs in this basket. So it was not great. And we have a lot of friends and peers in the community who, they thought they were going to be ruined overnight. These are people who they don't have their job is creating, is tied to this in one way or another. And, overnight that was at risk of going away. So it was a very, very big deal. But I try to be as agile as possible. So immediately I was like, okay, we gotta move on. We can't do this. We can't work in the environment that we're seeing is going to be, open to people. The reason why we don't really do a lot, we've collaborated on a few DMs Guild projects with friends and things like that. But the reason why our stuff isn't on the DMs Guild is because we didn't want to share with Wizards of the Coast. We didn't want, and it wasn't even about the money. It was about our ideas. It was about what is ours. That was what it was. So we didn't want that. And it looked like that was going to be really the only real avenue at that time. And there was a hard date that was being passed around and there was all this information that was coming out every day. And it was just becoming more and more of a thought, like, even if this does shake out somehow, is it going to be something that we're going to want to work in afterward? You know what I mean? So we had to pivot. As far as like my overall thoughts on it are that, they kind of did what they probably were planning on doing from the beginning, which is they caused a lot of turmoil. They ended up releasing the rules via the CC. And I think that I think going forward, Hasbro's plans are to focus on people who are not tabletop role players, aren't pen and paper role players, which is a large portion of the community is those people. I think Wizards has in their sight people who they're pulling in from MMOs and pulling in from all these other avenues, who are much more willing to do and much more accustomed to doing the kind of things that they want to do with like their pay models and things like that. So I really think it was, I kind of think it was just a big dog and pony show in my mind. Like it was, you know, this big outcry and they tried to get away with some stuff. And then people, I mean, a lot of amazing people did a lot of incredibly hard work to get, you know, the 5th edition rules dropped. But I don't really feel like they would have done that if they didn't already have plans. I don't feel like they would have made the same mistake they made back when, you know, Pathfinder took off. I don't feel like that was their plan this time. I could be wrong. You know, I'm not a genius by any means, but either way, I'm very happy that things worked out because we do still have a lot of peers and a lot of, you know, friends who were able to go, okay, we're not, you know, we're not ruined, which is amazing. And now there's a lot of really cool stuff that's coming from that being Creative Commons. So that's really rad. But yeah, we're done with it, but there's no hard feelings. And again, you can't replace the years of fun that I had with the game, you know, or whatever, and the people that I've met. So I don't think badly of anybody that's still creating for Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think badly of anybody that was still planning on creating for Dungeons and Dragons, no matter what. I just, you know, our place felt like it was someplace different. And so that's where we went.
Had you been considering, or had you known much about Cypher before the big blow up, or how were you familiar with Cypher? Just you've been creating those monthly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, we actually didn't start creating the monthly Cypher shorts or settings for Cypher. We were completely 5e until we made the pivot right after the start of the year. I had the books around. I have lots of system books on the shelf. You know, it's just we only really had time to create for one system, and we were just getting to the point where we're like, okay, what can we start converting some stuff to maybe kind of start branching out into other things? You know, we were already looking around for some other systems, but we weren't planning on, you know, doing this abrupt pivot. Yeah. So when we did decide to do that, I was like, well, we know what we want to do, what is going to serve that the best. And I loved the Cypher system. I've had to me, when I got that core book, the core rule book in my hands, and I was like, oh, this is a chef's kit for game designers. Cool. This tells you everything that you need to do to make your foci, to make your descriptors, to make your own everything. It's an amazing toolkit. I'm like, so we can take from this toolbox, we can create our own tools. We can, you know, it's amazing. So I really championed Cypher because we were trying to decide where we were going to go. And a lot of people were going over to Pathfinder very, very quickly because, you know, that's where the other part of the community was. But, you know, we again, it's a little more rigid than we like to be in. Like they're very great for what they do. I'm not going to disparage that system at all whatsoever, but, you know, it just didn't feel right for the types of things that we wanted to do. When I was going through Cypher with Keith and everything, it was like, this is a system that is truly narrative first. They encourage that at the table and in the design, which I appreciate. But there's still mechanics there. You know, I like to tool around with mechanics. I like to play around with things. Those are still there. And a lot of, you know, and I've had people tell me, you know, it's not the only narrative system out there. I know it's not the only narrative system out there. You know, there's things that are way more narrative than it is, but they feel a little too loose for me to be comfortable mechanics wise. You know what I mean? Playing in them's fine. Creating it in it is something different, you know? Yeah. So Cypher just kind of hit everything for us. We were like, this is amazing. It's perfect. And then we were super jazzed to like discover a new section of the role-playing community where everybody just seems like extra nice, like it's bananas.
I absolutely, I 100% agree with that. Like, and I don't really have another community necessarily to compare this to, because honestly, I haven't been deep into any one community really at all, except for maybe Cypher in the last, like, you know, I've been playing Cypher forever. I've first discovered it with Numenera, when it was Numenera in there, and then I started getting into it, and I started talking to people online, and I would say that it's a really welcoming and friendly community. And I mean, I think it probably, my guess is just basically that it's a smaller community, so it's a little bit easier to kind of for the people at the top, like, you know, Monty Cook Games, to sort of like oversee a lot of it, and there's none of this like, well, I won't get into it, but anyway, I just think it's a very nice, happy community, and I think it can be very beneficial to be slightly smaller than the bigger folks. Is there anything you miss about? This is a tough question. Anything you miss about 5e? Are you just like, oh my goodness, why can't we? Or are you kind of like, eh?
Oh, how do I say this and not sound like a jerk?
Uh-oh.
No. Honestly, no. There's not mechanics wise, no. I really loved creating players options and archetypes and things for 5th edition. I really did enjoy that. That had its own little interesting thing that I was able to do. But as far as like, is there anything that I'm like, oh, I wish Cypher was more like D&D in this way? No, that doesn't exist for me. I mean, I wish that the community had a little more eyes, I think maybe, which I think that's coming. As soon as there's a lot of big fulfillments that are coming. They're going to bring a lot of new people into the community, just, for all of us to enjoy. So that's going to be nice. But honestly, I don't really think there's anything that I find that's missing from, 5th edition to Cypher.
So tell us about Harrow, the Blighted Plane. I mean, was this originally, you said that you pivoted really quick. Mm-hmm. Had this been planned? Had you planned on releasing a setting? Like, was it behind the scenes or the bones of this in 5e somewhere? And then it just,
there's actually literally a supplement set in Harrow.
Oh, there we go.
Right now.
You're like Magneto pulling the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. You replaced it with Cypher.
Most of the things that you're going to see come out from us for quite a while have been in development in one form or another for over a decade. They've been ruminating. They've been, going through multiple changes and, everything, but the bones of them have been around for a very long time. Not everything, but a lot of them. Harrow is one of those things. It was originally just like a cool plane that you could get caught on in our fantasy world. So it was sort of adjacent to our core fantasy world that we play in our Underground Oracle games. It was a plane that you could get caught in. And so we released it as a planar stop off basically for people for their 5th edition games. And it was like one of our Planes Unknown series, which was like a way to introduce different cool pocket planes to your setting. And, so the very basics of Harrow are in that supplement basically. But it's like a 12-page supplement, so we couldn't fit in everything that we wanted to in there. And it was kind of like a micro setting for people to explore. But it was when we decided that we were going to go to Cypher and we were going to do these settings, we were like, well, we have a lot of very big worlds, and I don't think it's a good idea for us to tackle one of these behemoths right off the bat, because we're going to make mistakes. We're still learning. We're still trying to figure out if this is going to work. We're still trying to figure out if we're going to have everybody abandon us right off the bat. So what can we do that's going to feel different than what we've been doing, so that it intrigues new people that look at us, but then also that is something that we love and we are passionate about and that we would love to see come out and fruition. And Harrow ended up being that thing. So, it's kind of a combination of a lot of the things that we love, and it's like a very unique fantasy setting. So it was something that we thought was very cool to start with. But the bones of it have been around for a while. I have an old notebook in my office that just has like a circle with like the words like sand ocean ? And then like some little crystal deposits around it, stuff like that, and like a list of like things that I want to see. And that was before we started creating 5th edition supplements. It was just like this cool idea I had that I'm like, I want to create this world and for something and get people in it. So it's been around, and it's just developed and snowballed into what it is now that we're going to be getting out in front of people.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned how you were kind of like proceeding with caution and not like releasing this giant volume, and you chose to sort of focus on what I presume is a relatively smaller aspect of a much larger setting. I hadn't really thought of this before, but now I'm kind of wondering, do you have any idea how long the book is going to end up being? Because as I'm sort of imagining this, you sit down, and if you have like, and I apologize, I always forget what it's called, but the rule set that Monte Cook Games gives out that's like open source and all of that, or not open source, I'm so sorry, but that's going to take up a certain amount of space. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're going to have like, what is a role-playing game? You're going to have all these other things that are maybe in it. How long is the book? Are we looking at something that's Cypher System like length, or Stars of Fire length, or Tullus
Oh
length,
my
or
gosh, no. See, yet we weren't ready for a Tolus size
right?
behemoth yet. That's what I was referencing. Monty Coast got some beefcakes under his belt.
Yes, that is true.
Harrow will probably end up being, depending on how many stretch goals we hit, it'll probably end up being about the size of one of the white books, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So it will have like the core rules that you need to play, and then all the cool things that we've done to it, and then the setting for Harrow. And depending on how many stretch goals we hit, it might have, more that we want to include in there. But there's going to be there's a full adventure. There's a couple of focused Cypher shorts that are set specifically in Harrow.
Cool.
There's explanations of the major wild places that you can explore.
Mm-hmm.
There's the four nations, which are the civilizations
Mm-hmm.
on the Blighted Plane. So there's tons of creatures, ciphers, all the normal really cool stuff that you get. But it'll probably end up being about the size of one of the white books, I would say.
That's cool. Well, so we've talked all around it, but so now you've described it as high fantasy, post-apocalypse, crystal punk. Can you tell us kind of in your no pressure, in your own words, what is the setting then? Tell us a little bit about the Blighted Plane.
We use the word post-apocalypse because it is a post-apocalyptic world, in that it was a very different setting before this great cataclysm that was caused by these beings that ruled over them and controlled every aspect of their life. So they're living in this very changed world, but they're also they get to explore freedom that they never had prior to the fall of the world. So in a way, it's kind of a very bittersweet thing. But the setting overall is very optimistic. These are people that, yes, they are living in a fallen world, but they're looking forward. They're making things better. They're working together. So it's very positive in that way. We didn't want to make something that was very dark, even though it has dark origins. Which I don't know how far you want me to get into the weeds with the explanation of that, but basically the world was ruled by these beings called the Kataria, and they were kind of saw themselves as these very benevolent deities, essentially, that should control every aspect of life around them, and then alter that life to their ideas of perfection and what they saw that they were best suited for. So they really removed all the agency from the people around them. They really removed themselves from the natural, ebb and flow just of nature, all this. And eventually that came to a head and the people rebelled, and there was this great cataclysm that, shattered the plane. It blighted the plane with these crystal energies. And then the people just, you walk into Harrow a few hundred years after that has happened. So the four nations are well established. They're moving forward. People have these patterns of life, in this wild, fluctuating world. They still get up and go to work every day. It's just what they're doing is, a lot different than you might see in a normal fantasy setting. And there's because it is, there is this really cool energy flowing through the plane. It allows us to explore a lot of really, really strange things in the plane. So, instead of trees being the predominant, life among the flora, you've got a lot of these different types of fungus and things like that. So there's these massive fungal oases that people have to explore and avoid creatures in. And, there's this huge, endless sand sea that they sail across in their sand ships. And, there's a lot of very, very cool things that you get to, it's a setting that's made for like discovery and for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think from looking at it, and that's kind of one of the things that I was going to say about it. Like I only know what everybody else knows about it, and probably a little bit less than that, because I haven't seen the stuff that you have on Patreon behind the paywall. But like the thing that struck me about it is that, like you said, it seems positive, but it also seems or hopeful. It also really it has a look and feel to it like a Cypher System game. Like there's a clear kind of like theme. There's like a thematic kind of continuity to a lot. And I guess it makes sense if they're all being put out by Monte Cook Games, but you can kind of see this common thread going through all of their games. And I feel like from what I've seen of Harrow, the Blighted Plane, it very much kind of follows that. Would you kind of agree with that, or is
I would say, like, because I would be a fool to say that I haven't been influenced by the design philosophies of Monte Cook Games. even though I don't have as much experience with Numenera as other people do, because we are who we are, I avoid other people's settings and things for the most part. I'll buy them and I'll read through them or whatever, but we always do our own thing in our own worlds or whatever. But when his genre source books and things like that, I've always really, really loved those, and the core book, of course. But yeah, there is like, and it might be something that I took away from either reading a blog or reading something from Monte Cook Games. I can't remember, but it's just like the cool part about that system is the discovery of new things. Of you don't gain experience points from killing monsters. You gain experience points from experiencing things. And that could be a variety of things, which I think is, and that's a way that we've played forever, and a lot of people play that way. But to have that explicitly stated in the rules, and then to have that followed up on with the materials is very, very cool to me. And so that's something that Harrow does fit very, very well in. You're taking on, as the PCs, you're taking on the position of gatherers in this world, and it's a very important position for all four of the nations, no matter how different they are from one another. You need people who are willing to go out and brave the wilds and the wastes to bring back, resources, to bring back, the important things that the nations need to continue to survive and to thrive and to build. So in the bones of that is you're putting the PCs in the position to go out and discover new things, to come across these new materials, these new creatures, these new locations. It's sort of part and parcel of being in the PC's position in the world. No matter which of any of the character types they decide to build or anything like that, it's assumed that you're a gatherer, and whether you're doing that specifically for the nation and you're allowing these nation sponsored gathering trips, or you're doing it on your own just because you're the kind of people that want to go out and get your own riches and power, or establish your own name. You have those options to do those things, but it still puts you in that role of being pushed out into the world and coming back. And I think that is something that's like, it's very, discoverability is like a big, big theme that runs through the Monte Cook game stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because in the chat that it just kind of blew up, and suddenly everyone's talking about how much discovery and exploration are so much in the DNA of like any Monte Cook game. And I mean, it's interesting that this theme keeps sort of like returning. And I guess, like you said, it was built on it really, because if you look at Numenera, it was all about like exploring the world and getting to sort of like taking a journey as like a traveler, as someone moving through like levels of knowledge about the world around them and all of that. And so the chat is actually just sort of, they're discussing that actually like right now.
Awesome.
Chat, I just want to say I'm so sorry. Jess can't speak to you because she doesn't have the chat open. I can't speak to you just because I do have the chat open, but I'm so bad at like hosting and streaming that I can only like do one thing at one time. And so I feel really awful, but I'm glad that you are all entertaining yourselves with each other. Thank you very much for that. Let me ask you this then. How did you find your artists who are sort of carrying this theme along? So I'm so sorry. I'm going to say these wrong, but I'm gonna try because I'm a teacher and I try. Your two featured artists are Tosca Skelton and Alex Pushkarev.
Yes.
Which I've just said, whose names I've just butchered, and I will write a 100-word apology to each of them by snail mail afterward. But where'd you find him? How'd you find him?
Well, and those are two featured artists because they are the ones who, Tosca really did an amazing job working with Keith. Keith kind of plays one of Keith's many hats is that of art director. So he kind of makes sure, that all the artists are on the same page, that they're all doing the same thing. And Tosca was really, really the one that drove like those initial designs that we were able to present to other artists that we worked to, that was like, this is the look and feel that we want for Harrow. And so Tosca has amazingly captured that. She actually, we started working with her relatively recently. Mm-hmm. She was on a few of our last 5E supplements, but relatively new with us, but she's absolutely amazing. Can't recommend her enough. And she reached out to us actually through our contact page on Underground Oracle. And so, we started talking, and she showed me her art, and we just ended up meshing really well together. And she kind of became one of the underground Oracle artists that we work with frequently, and has been instrumental in the development of Harrow. So that's why she's one of the featured artists down there. Alex, we've worked with Alex for a very long time. He was we brought he maybe the second or third artist that we ever started working with creating supplements, and he's done mostly creatures for us. He's a talented artist. He does these amazing scenes and everything, but as a small publisher, you kind of have to work with what you can afford. So for us, we have to be like, oh, this is our budget, what can we get for that? But he makes so many amazing creatures, and I've tried to show as many of them off online as I can and on the website as I can. Keith sometimes has these visions in his head of what he wants something to be, and they're exactly what they need to be for the world. And Alex has just been able to capture those like so well and work with us so well. So that's been amazing as well. I cannot for the life of me remember if I reached out to him or if he reached out to me first. All I know is we've been working together for a while, and it's been magnificent. And there's a lot of other artists that are present in the book that either we've directly commissioned and we're using them, or that we've bought their stock art, because again, we're small publishers, so we have to use a lot of stock art. We've had this question crop up a lot in our Kickstarter comments, which I didn't realize was that big of a deal, but we don't use any AI art. Apparently people they make up artist names and stuff sometimes,
right?
Which I didn't know people went to those links. We don't use AI art in our publications. We use human created art that we've either commissioned or that we purchase through stock art. We use a lot of stock art because we are smaller. So, unless we're able to do a big Kickstarter or something, you'll see a lot of stock art in our things as well. But we're lucky to have talented artists like Tosca and like Alex that work with us on the pieces that we get to put out in front of people. But yeah, they're amazing. Everybody, their contact information is on the Kickstarter page. So if anybody wants to hit them up to commission them, I highly recommend it. They're both amazing.
Yes, for sure. And that's actually something that I would like sort of second myself. The artwork that I've seen for it so far, like I said, it's very much, it's its own thing, but it's got that sort of positive, hopeful Monty Cook sort of look and feel to it, but it is at the same time distinct and evocative of the world. So you can kind of recognize it, but it's still not too different, so different that it feels like very alien or foreign. And I would also just say, like, it's really interesting, like the people that you can sort of discover out there, because I myself too, I've been looking for artists and people to commission and working with them and all of that. And it's so funny what you mentioned about like your budget. Like your budget. Like the first time I sat down and like I'm like, I'm gonna make it a game as big as Vert. It's gonna be 400 pages long, and it's gonna have a beautiful gatefold map of the entire world designed by whoever. And I like looked at my budget and I'm like, oh, I can probably afford 2 pieces of artwork.
I get a piece of art at the front, and then I need to draw some stuff.
And maybe what I can do is stretch it by reversing it and changing the color and then making it smaller and bigger on different pages, and no one will notice the difference.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Crop it here, crop it there. If I crop it in half, I can use it twice, 2 different pieces.
Yeah. That's the struggle for a small publisher.
Yes,
definitely a struggle.
I totally identify with that.
Oh, and he's not on the featured art page. We have been pushing we've been passing his images around of the flags of the 4 nations. Anderson Maya is an artist that he hasn't done as much work on this project as other artists, but we've worked with him so much in the past on all of our supplements. And he is the one who Keith designed each of the nation symbols, and then he kind of brought them to life with his art.
Oh, cool.
And they're very, very cool, very amazing. So Anderson Maya is also someone that I want to shout out and just say, reach out to him if you guys need any art.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. So we talked about, so you're using obviously Cypher System, and you're building your setting in your world here. But the cool thing about this kind of, I hate to call it a generic rule set, but is kind of tweaking it and changing it. Have you done much of that for the game? Are you have you gotten into like developing your ciphers for it, or developing other?
Yeah, we have tons of, all of our ciphers are original. All the artifacts are original. We built out our own types using a combination of abilities that we created or abilities that were available in the SRD, and then just flavoring them to the setting and making them. we have for Harrow, we have 3 types that you can choose from, and they are tailored to the setting. So you still get to choose things from those ability sets, but it definitely, one of the things when we talk to people, like their biggest stopper to just like picking up the core Cypher book was just kind of being overwhelmed with all the options that were available. Like some people just don't have, some people see all those options presented and they kind of almost freeze from that. And so we knew when we created this, we wanted to make kind of an ease of entry for people both into the Cypher system, and for, because a lot of our people who we were hoping would pledge to this and who would back us on this were coming from D&D to the Cypher system for the first time. So they're learning, all of our patrons, not all of them, but a lot of our patrons were learning Cypher system through the Harrow materials that we were presenting to them. So we wanted to try to make it seem as accessible as possible. And part of doing that was taking and making these tailored types and having these, you know, like specific ability sets that you can choose from, but that are more limited than having just like 1,000 abilities in front of you that you get to choose from. So we have the Shrieker, which is like the warrior type, and they're built for, you know, battle in Harrow. And then we have the Rover, which is your classic explorer type. You know, when you think gatherer, you think rover. They're the people that are out there mixing it up. And then there's the Blight Slinger, which is this setting's representation for any sort of like magical ability. But like I've said before, it's not like wizard style magic. It's much more like psionic style, where it's much more like you're pulling it from the air around you. It's a much more tactile use of magic, which has been very cool. But yeah, so there's those 3 types that we've tailored. And then we have foci from the SRD that we have reflavored for the setting specifically. So for instance, the one for driving, which is, I'm blanking on the name for it now, drives like a maniac might have been what it is or something, I can't remember. We tailored that and changed it around, and now it's tears across the water sands. So it's like, if you want to be that cool person on the Dune Leaper who's zipping around the raiders and like able to do all these cool tricks and like get in and out, you know, you're able to play that way, and we flavored it that way. And then, you know, there's a lot of things we've done with like that, and we've created a couple of our own foci. Descriptors are the same way. We've created our own descriptors, but there's a lot from the SRD that are there, you know, that people can do. 5 species that we've created. This is a setting where you get to have a species and a descriptor. I know there are some.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's 5 different species, which each give you a little bit of an ability, you know, and then before you carry on. So we've created a lot, which is cool. We've been able to have a lot of fun, but to be honest, Monty Cook has been so generous with the CSRD. They just updated it like yesterday. They've been so generous with it that there was a lot of stuff that we could take from there and then go, okay, we can reflavor this and reutilize this and present it to people. So that kind of takes off a lot of that heavy lifting.
Yeah, I was going to ask this, and I guess you don't have to, you can go into as much or as little detail as you like, but just out of curiosity, so when, and this is more of a nuts and bolts kind of question, right? So when you're looking at the CSRD and or the, you know, the OGL or whatever it was, do you actually have to sort of run these changes or tweaks by the publisher, or is there a certain amount of leeway?
Once it's in the SRD, you can kind of reference it in the way you want and take from it what you want. Now, I did have a very cool experience, which was like our opening experience with Cypher System, which I thought was amazing. Which was we wanted to create Cypher Shorts. Cypher Shorts exist with their own little specific rule set, basically.
Yeah.
That were not a part of the SRD when they created it for third-party people. I did not realize that until after we had already invested a lot of time in creating a lot of these. And I was like, oh no, what are we gonna do? So I wrote Charles Ryan at Monty Cook Games. And I was like, hey, this is not a part of the CSRD. So, you know, I understand if this is a no-go, but you know, we have these Cypher Shorts. I can reword things so that I'm not stepping on you or anything. And then I can reference back to your thing, but I just want to make sure, you know, that's okay with you. And how would you like me to approach this? You know, basically, you know, I wanted to be respectful. I really didn't expect to hear anything back. So I thought we were just going to have to can them. And then he wrote me back and he was like, oh, he's like, yeah, these rules are free. So they should probably be a part of the SRD anyway. So we'll just put them in the SRD update. You can go ahead and put yours out.
Zing.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect to hear back at all in the first place. And then to be like, you know what, you're right, we're going to add that to the SRD and you can go ahead and do it. it's amazing. But I mean, that's just, and I also think that's why the community is so awesome, because it is that top down, sort of thing where it's like the people at the company are rad, the people
Yeah.
that support them are going to be rad too.
Yeah.
And that's improving to me. But yeah, it's been, but yeah, once it's in the SRD, you can, and I don't know if you've taken a look through the CSRD, but a lot of the, most of it is like ability lists and rules lists and things like that, but there's not a lot of flavor or anything in there. So you would kind of have to add that yourself.
Right.
If you wanted
Anyway.
to present that to the public.
Yeah.
Because just giving them a naked list of, abilities isn't fun. But yeah, once it's available in that CSRD, you can do with it what you will publicly.
Cool.
We never, as far as like for when we were creating for 5th edition, the only time that we checked things was to make sure that we weren't using something we weren't supposed to, because we created so much of our own stuff. So that was never an issue. Like we're utilizing, I would say, the materials from the SRD in Cypher much more than we have in previous things, but it's because it's so great, to be quite honest with you. And we're able to take those and tailor them down to the settings so well. I mean, I know Monty Cook Games has made some amazing settings, so in no way is this meant to take away from that whatsoever. But I think they made an amazing toolkit so that people can use, and I will constantly tell that to every designer that I talk to. Like, they made such an amazing toolkit with just like, I mean, if you read the Cypher System rulebook, which is big, but if you read it cover to cover, you will pick up so much, and you'll be, it's just, honestly, it's great. So
yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, I picked up Numenera, I don't know how many years ago, within a year of its publication. I don't want to think of how long ago that was. And then like, I haven't really, I mean, I still play, like, you can see all the stuff on my shelves back here, but I pretty much circle back to Cypher, Numenera, and MCG games like all the time. What would you say, like, so this is the first like big giant thing that you're creating here. What do you think you've learned or not learned? What have you ignorantly barred, like,
Talk to me in a couple weeks.
Oh, you're not sure yet? You're still confused?
The full story. I feel like I'm learning a lot of stuff right now. First of all, this is our first 30-day Kickstarter. We've done one other Kickstarter before, and it was for Under the Harvest Moons, which was a collection of horror materials that we had slowly created over our time as 5th edition publishers, and then decided to remaster and compile into I'm going to use an old person word, splat book. So it was like, it was already finished materials. Basically, it was, I think, a little over 50 pages long. It was, the layout was finished. Chris Hopper's amazing at layout, by the way. He's also doing the layout for Harrow. The layout was finished before the Kickstarter even completed. It was ready to go out the door.
You covered your bases.
Yeah, it was super small, super tight, and we kicked its butt. And I was like, yeah, we're great at this. This is awesome. A 30-day Kickstarter is entirely different. Creating for a whole new TTRPG system is entirely different. Trying to put together an entire world book is entirely different, because you're you have to be the bad guy sometimes and be like, this is going to have to be taken out and saved for a supplement in the future, because this is the core book, and we have to make sure we're getting the core ideas across, and we have to be able to manage that correctly. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff that, I've had to be the bad guy and be like, this has to be shelved for a little while, and then when we bring out our first Harrow supplement, we can put it in there, but it's not in the Harrow core book. You know what I mean? So that's been a learning experience. I mean, I've been learning a lot. Some of it good, some of it bad. I mean, all of it's good because I'm carrying it forward.
Right.
The next one's going to be even better. The next one's going to be even easier. I'm going to be able to apply all these hard knock lessons that we're learning now going forward. So no matter what happens, I'm not going to regret anything that we've done, because I know we're going to be able to take that back and effectively use it going forward. So I'm very psyched about that. I would be lying if I was saying that this is like easy breezy. Like, no, it's not. It's not at all.
Yeah, I imagine like people doing a Kickstarter, like whenever I talk to them through Zoom, I imagine everything outside of the Zoom frame just being complete and utter chaos, and like looking like,
you have no idea how right you are.
Right now. Like the offices at Mad Magazine or something. Um, so let me ask you this then. So there are a lot of people that, you know, they're out there, they've got their great ideas and they're trying to make a way for themselves in RPGs, and they haven't gotten as far as you and Keith, and now you've hired Kayla. I'm sorry, Kayla, I didn't mention you earlier. How did you persevere and do this? How can other people turn, you know, their desire to just be a fan, writing stuff down and showing their players, to someone that's publishing it and doing a Kickstarter to boot? What do you think?
Well, I signed up to a lot of Patreons to observe people. I read a lot of existing materials to see what people who I liked or didn't like their materials, what they were doing, and what I could take away from that. So I'm constantly looking at people's stuff, even if it's something that I'm like, I know I'm not gonna like this. Also look at it, because it's like, what don't I like about this?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Is it something that's just a part of like the flavor, or is it like, is there something in the bones I'm not a fan of, and how can I avoid doing this going forward, basically? So everything's a learning opportunity. That's kind of how you have to approach things. Also, I was very lucky because I found a Discord community pretty early on, called Domil's Wondrous Works. It's run by an amazing map maker in the community named Domil, and she ran a very supportive community for a lot of small creators. So I was able to get a lot of advice there. I was able to get a lot of retweets there, which when you have less than 100 people is a very big deal. It's a huge deal. And so I was able to like kind of have a nice little base we were able to launch from, with the assistance of some very cool people in that community. And then we were able to, use that to go forward socially, because that's a big part of it, is getting in the community, experiencing the community, interacting with the community. If you're coming out of the gate cold, it's not like you're trying to get people to pick up your book from Barnes and Nobles. The social community online is very, very different from that. So you got to get out there and you have to develop that. And I was very lucky that I had people that were like, hey, you're doing this thing on Twitter wrong. You should be doing it this way or whatever. You need to stop doing this because people are going to think there's something wrong with you. But so I'm lucky I had that. And which I'm going to plug this right now. I'm the community manager for another community that Dom started called Rising Tide. And it is completely made to help cater to people who are trying to make their way in the TTRPG community. So that's a great thing to look for, is find these communities, whether it's that one or it's another one, to kind of put yourself in. And even if you're not the kind of person that talks, like I was a lurker forever before I ever started talking to people, because I'm just I know it's not going to seem like that. I'm a nervous person. I'm kind of a shy wallflower.
I can tell.
So, yeah, right. I mean, no, but I am. And so I was very nervous, especially if you feel like when you're just starting out, you feel like you don't almost have the right to talk to people. Like, it's like, I know who you are, so I don't have the right to talk to you. And you got to kind of eliminate that mindset. First of all, because most people are going to be cool to you, assuming that you're not just like, hey, help me promote my stuff. If you're actually trying to interact with them, most people are going to be very cool. And they're going to be helpful. So find your little niche community that you can find some support in, that you can learn some lessons in and you can learn from. Dig into that. Interact with people. That's a very, very big thing. Learn from people. And also don't beat yourself up if you cannot keep up with people that you're looking at. We are able to do what we're doing now. We weren't able to do that 5 years ago because we just were not in the life position to do that. We have been most of the time not able to do that. And we're only able to do it and do what we're doing now because we started making 3-page supplements twice a week at the very beginning. So measure yourself against your own success. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Am I moving forward? If you're moving forward, you're succeeding. And don't be afraid to fail. You have to be willing to eat. You gotta get out there and eat dirt. Like, you have to be willing to do that, because that's a big part of it. And no matter if yours is a masterpiece, I mean, we've all seen it. You've got designers and creators that are the biggest names in the industry, and there's always going to be someone on the sidelines going, that person sucks. I hate the things that they make. So it doesn't matter how big you get, you're always going to have those people there. So don't be afraid of those people. Just find a team to collaborate and bounce things off of. I have a lot of people that I owe a lot to, who I've never written anything with, but we were able to bounce ideas back and forth off of each other. We were able to learn from each other that way. So, just kind of find your people and look for that, and then don't be afraid to fail. For me personally, starting a Patreon was a good thing. because I was the kind of person that I needed to have that amount of pressure
Right.
in order to push forward. If I did not have that, I would probably still be waiting to get things perfect and put out. I knew that I had somebody, I knew that I had one person paying me $3 a month that was waiting on their supplement.
Yeah.
And that was enough to get me going. So you find the thing that's going to spur you forward, and then don't be afraid to trip and fall flat on your face, and then pick yourself back up and keep going. Because I cannot count the number of times that we have fallen flat on our face, and the number of times we probably will again, but you just got to be willing to be like, okay, I'm going to wipe the blood off. I'm going to keep going forward. That's really what it's about. It's just tenacity. I got really good advice very early on, which was your stuff is good, but you need to be willing to beat your head against the wall for a long time, because it's going to take that for somebody to actually see that your stuff is good, because there's so many people out there. And that's really what it is. You're going to continuously feel like you're running into walls, you're running into walls, you're running into walls. And it's really, you have to be willing to be resilient and kind of be like, okay, I'm going to find a way over this wall or under this wall or around this wall, or I'm going to do whatever I can, and I'm going to keep going. And I don't care how many times I hit my head against this wall. And that's really all that it is. It's just tenacity more than it is anything else. That's what I would say, is just be tenacious.
When Harrow is delivered and someone somewhere in the world opens up that box and that new freshly printed book smell hits them, and they run to the table and sit down with their friends with the game, what are you hoping that they get out of your game?
Well, that almost made me tear up. You're getting me emotional over here. Like, I can't wait for that moment.
Isn't that exciting? That's going to happen.
Yeah, it is.
Hundreds of times.
It's amazing. And what I want to give to people the same thing that I have been able to enjoy in this community, and from the books that I've opened, and from just knowing that I was able to give these people hours of a world to get lost in and to explore and to be these cool, incredible things that they're not able to be in ordinary life. To know that I was able to do that for someone will make me feel like I've absolutely accomplished my mission.
Well, just so you know, Jess, I know that you haven't been able to read the chat, but Keith has been in there the whole time. And having Jess as this is a quote, having Jess as a partner makes everything I do better, and having a partner that is real with you and supports you is the best, among many, many other things, which you will be able to read after our interview is over. So I
do want to take a second just to say, another thing that has made this new Kickstarter possible and this new publishing cadence possible is onboarding Kayla Bands as our general manager. She is now scrapping it out with us. So I want to thank her for that. She's amazing. She's got a long behind the scenes history in the TTRPG community. She's done a lot of the management, and that was really, me and Keith are big dreamers, big creators, big, everything. But every now and then we definitely need someone to help correct course the ship and keep things on task, do those, things that sometimes we get lost in. And she's been amazing for that. She's also an incredibly talented writer. So she's also doing a lot of writing and development right alongside us now too. So, even though she wasn't there for the development of the major development of Harrow and stuff, she's still got her stamp on the world. She's still in there, and she's going to be even more present in everything else that we do going forward. But just bringing her onto the team and having that extra member has also been instrumental to making this a possibility. I would probably be in a disheveled, in tears wreck right now if it was just me and Keith, because, it outside of art, when you're small publishers, you're doing everything yourself. You're every department that's at a company, you're now the person that's doing that. You know what I mean? So with just two people, it's very, very difficult if you're trying to keep up a very set schedule, very set, publishing cadence. That's a very difficult thing to accomplish as small people. So Kayla's come on, and she's been amazing to help us accomplish that.
Well, I want to say congratulations, just because for those of you that don't know, so there was a, I don't know what it's called. The limit or the funding goal was $7,000, and they'd blown past that. They're just shy of $10,000 dollars right now. It's obviously a success, and with a couple weeks left to go, I think it's safe to say you're going to make some money on top of that as well. Is there a big plan once people are playing the game and it's out and you can like sit down and just like allow yourself a breath? What's the next step for Underground Oracle?
Well, we're turning right around, and again, this is where we're going to be learning a lot this year, which we kind of have been, we told our patrons right off the bat, because we wanted to be as transparent with them as possible. We're trying something new, so you might have to bear with us for a little bit, because we're still trying to get our feet in this new scenario that we've created for ourselves. So our plan is to turn right around and dig into the next cycle of a setting. So cool. We'll be getting that quick start out for an entirely new world and an entirely new genre, and developing that over the next series of months. Hopefully responding to awesome feedback from Harrow and putting out little supplements on the side to extend that kind of thing. So that our plan going forward is to basically keep emulating what we've done, which is develop with our Patreon a setting, fleshing it out, and then kickstarting it to get it published, and then supplementing that setting as you go forward with new and cool stuff that people might want to see, so clearly you can't fit everything you want in about a specific location in this world. Like, I love the Mound. The Mound is the primary city in Harrow. I could write an entire book just on the Mound, but no, that would not be feasible where we're at right now. Right. What we can do is we can put out the core book, and then we can do a supplement that's just on the Mound with all the cool little bobs and bits, that you can get in there. So that's the plan going forward for basically everything that we do, is to just, and again, I want to thank our Patreon supporters, because that is really what allows us to keep doing this on a regular basis. We haven't had the benefit of like doing a bunch of big Kickstarters and stocking back any money or anything. So the everything that we get from that Kickstarter goes right back into making sure that we can keep doing this rolling forward. So big shout out to them. Also, if you're not on the Patreon, $3 a month, and you get to develop the next world from, the ground up with us, which is pretty rad. But yeah, it's been amazing, and we're just going to try to take the best parts of it and carry it forward, and just keep, learning and keep improving and keep, just getting it out. And, by 2 years from now, we might be like, oh, let's redo Harrow, because, we need to remaster it and make it into, what we want it to be right off the jump, or we have all these new supplements that we want to put in there, which that is the cool thing too. It's like you look at Monty Hook Games, and they put out Numenera, and then they basically they relaunched everything at a certain point, and we're able to do all this really cool bigger stuff that they developed over the years in between. So we've got plans to do things like that, but it's basically continue carrying forward and exploring these worlds that we've created with people.
Well, Jess, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. Again, what you and Keith and Kayla are doing, I really admire. It's something that I've always wanted to do myself. And in that respect, I appreciate you sharing your experiences and your knowledge with me and with my viewers tonight. I wish you the best. And for those of you that are watching at home, usually, and I apologize, I didn't have to, my life has been crazy the last month or so. I've been moving, I've been doing parent-teacher conferences, and I've also been drinking a lot of caffeine, which doesn't have the effect that you might think. It has different effects on me. But at any rate, I would ordinarily put tons of links to all of Underground Oracle stuff in the description below, but I did not do that. But I assure you, once this is over and I calm down, I'm going to go and I'm going to put all those links in there. So if you're watching this in the future in a recording, please do jump to those links down below and check out Underground Oracle's stuff. There are still, I believe, 2 weeks left on the Kickstarter. I'm going to do my best to get other links to, say, the Patreon and their homepage and all that stuff too, so you can know where to find everything else, all the other cool things that they're doing. Please do support the Cypher community. Check it out. You will not regret it. You're going to be very excited by the cool new worlds that you find that the people in the community are creating. For myself, though, on behalf of myself, I just want to thank all of you. Our numbers have been going up slowly but surely. Our subscriptions are going up. I really appreciate everybody that has signed on to the channel. Thank you so much for that. You can really always help the channel out just by simply liking and sharing. If you can share the good word, the good work that we're doing. If you didn't like any particular, if you didn't like this interview, I've got tons of other ones that are just as cool. I can assure you. But if you share the stuff that you see that you like, it really goes a long way. It's amazing how one person sharing something a couple times, I see little explosions in my subscriptions, and it makes me feel good knowing that the creators I'm profiling, the players that I have are getting their due. So please do think about liking, subscribing, and of course, sharing. But at any rate, I have gone on for long enough. Jess, I want to thank you one final time for coming on. Keith, thank you very much for keeping the chat going as well. We very much appreciate that. For all of you out there, we'll be back in a week with Sword in the Darkness, and then the week after that with another episode of Role Player with 1,000 Faces. Thank you all very much. Everybody stay safe and have a great game. I'll see you on the next episode.